quick overview video of what I did to create my clicker makeup. It is my biggest makeup yet and actually a mask. The first step is sculpting the clicker, and this took me 2 days to do. So you start with a full head cast and you just pack on that monster clay to get basic disc shapes. Started to add on the little coralish details and shapes towards the outside of the discs, and then to combine the pieces all together so it looks like it's one organism, I started to smooth out the texture with some tools, and a blow dryer on low heat really helps to just melt that monster clay, and naphtha will also help to melt down the clay just to combine it all into one smooth surface. I used individual resin teeth in this sculpt, which I then took out during molding, and the final touch for this after sculpting and smoothing out everything was adding just a little detail of veins on the front of the face, and then again using heat to help smooth out the clay around it and make it look like it's all one piece. Now onto moulding. I was fortunate enough to have the help and guidance of two amazing experienced mould makers here in Perth called Rich and Dan, and I'm so thankful for their help with this. So I started by spraying my sculpt a few times with crystal clear and coated any exposed plaster and Vaseline like the usual releases. I built my retaining wall out of wet clay, being careful to avoid having any undercuts, and we are creating a two-part mold, so we split it down the middle, down that crack in the sculpt using a clay wall to divide it. We added keys and pry points, which you can see here, and we used Ultra Cal 30 for this, reinforcing the mold with fiberglass sheets once the detail coat was down. After that had set, we flipped it over, removed the clay wall, so you can see the pry points and keys here are in the Ultra Cal now, and we released the exposed Ultra Cal with Vaseline, put another retaining wall around that, and put Ultra Cal and fiberglass in the other side as well. This process took about a day. Then I had to clean all the clay out of the mold, which took about another day to do. Now onto casting this thing. I used latex and filled it with an expanding soft foam, which is kind of like the poor man's foam latex. We don't actually have foam latex facilities here in Perth that I can use, at least to my knowledge. So this took me about 2 days to do in the workshop, but you can do it in 1 day if you're smart about it. Firstly, I used soap to release my molds, then I stippled on 5 thin coats of latex, drying between each layer on both sides of my mold and my face positive. In the last layer, I added fine fiberglass fibers into the wet latex coat so that the foam would have something to mechanically bond it to the latex, or else it could have easily delaminated while removing it from the mold, causing it to have a second skin, as soft foam and latex won't bond to each other naturally. And I put both halves back together, used tape to secure it, and put 3 more layers of latex over the seam with more fiberglass in that last layer, as this is the weakest part of the mold and I didn't want it to tear during demolding. Now to pour the foam. This was kind of intense because it has a 7-second mix time and then like a 13-second pour time, so you had to be fast. So once I got that mixed, we poured that bad boy into the mold and pushed it into the grooves with chip brushes, and after brushing it in for a couple of seconds, we stretched the mold slightly open to push that face positive back in, then strapped the mold horizontally, but we didn't have enough time to strap it vertically, so instead we used myself as a quick way to keep the foam from expanding too far out of the mold and just to keep it denser. So after sitting in the mold for maybe 15 minutes, I got up and there was only a small amount of foam leakage. Then we open up the mold, and this takes some time, so you gotta be patient with it. You've gotten your thing out and you can celebrate because it made it. The next step is seaming. So you've got all the excess latex and foam that need to be removed. So I'm going to get my nail scissors and cut out any extra foam and latex from around the edges, and then cut as much of that latex seam from where our 2 halves met down the center of the face. And then to get that super smooth, you want to use a Dremel with a cotton attachment just to further refine and remove any of those extra latex ridges. Then I went over those seams with some Bondo, which is a thickened Prosade cream, because it was still a little bit uneven and some places went a little bit too deep with the Dremel, so you can just really smooth it out and repair any areas that went too deep. And lastly, I made a mix of latex and Prosade, which is what you use to repair any holes in the latex, so I used it for that, and I also used it to go over the seam just to try and smooth out the whole area and disguise where the seam was, so it just looked really flat. I also used Prosade to glue the resin teeth back in, and then I used some of this Bondo to repair that gum line and make sure they were really anchored. The last step before pre-painting is getting some scissors and just cutting all the way through where that slit in the sculpt is to make sure that I can see through there and have some vision while wearing this. Now for pre-painting, this took me a whole day to do. I started with mixing some white Pax paint just to airbrush over the whole thing and get it a nice white color for painting. Pax paint, if you don't know, is just white acrylic paint mixed with no-tack Prosade, and to airbrush it you just need to water it down so it's thin enough to be pushed out of your airbrush. I used my Pache H in the number 5 needle. For some more translucent washes, I started with a layer of pale yellow, which I airbrushed towards the edges, and then a burnt orange color just a little bit closer to the edge, so it's like a transition. And lastly, I wanted some dark blood orange, more opaque coloring for the outer edge, so I mixed up some more PAX paint and I hand painted this on to the outer tips. I would use one brush to apply a little bit of the color and then a bigger brush and water to just blend out that color down towards the center of the mask in a gradient. I also made some PAX paint for the gum color and painted that on around the teeth. And then I went back to the alcohol colors to create those kind of shadow colors and darken and deepen that crease. So I used grays, both hand painted and airbrushed on down through the gum line and up throughout the face. Then I went in with some more alcohol paints for the gum area to make that look a bit more realistic. So I added some browns and some pinks and some grays so it looks kind of sore. I also coated the gums and teeth in a clear nail enamel to make it look really wet and shiny. And then lastly, I decided I wanted to coat the whole mask in just another layer of Prozade because I was worried about the paintwork coming off, like especially the alcohol paints. So I just airbrushed a layer of non-stick Prozade over everything and then also did a layer of Final Seal. And Final Seal was supposed to be a matte sealer, but it actually ended up looking quite shiny on this mask, but I liked that, so it's okay. I also added an elastic band around the back of this, which I just sewed inside the inside of the mask, and this is just going to be hidden underneath my messy, crazy clicker hair. For my clothes, to distress them, I cut them up with scissors. I used a rasp and a Ceraform tool and some sandpaper just to tear up the fabric and make it look messy. I also used some tea, some coffee, some fake blood and fake dirt to stain and age the clothes. Now the best part, the application. So this took me about an hour, I think, adding all the body paint and fuzz. I started by putting down a very light layer of white body paint over all my exposed skin, and it can be kind of patchy. I think that looks cool. Then I cut up some shapes out of a white foam board and started adhering them with Bondo paste. So this creates our fungal discs. So I made a few different shapes and sizes of those. You can put as many or as little of these as you like. I did it mostly on my neck and my shoulders and only a couple down my arms. And to adhere the fuzz, I decided I wanted to use gelatin. I'm going to use Mehron's 3D gel, so I put a thin layer down and then stuck some cotton ball fibers over it all. After I let them dry in the gelatin, I would try and remove most of the cotton buildup to just leave a thinner layer of fuzz. I also covered the edges of the foam board with this just to disguise where it connects with my skin. Then to help this look less uniform and more muddy and gross, I decided to airbrush some grey Skin Illustrator inks around the discs and the cotton fibers and a little bit down onto my arms. To make sure my real upper teeth were not going to be visible underneath the mask, I added a layer of black tooth enamel by Kryolan, which looks kind of funny when you're not wearing the mask. And I added the blood down the front of my face and my neck. To get grosser, clicker looking hair, firstly I hairsprayed my hair down and away from my face to sit underneath the mask, and then at the back I teased it, added some conditioner and added some hairspray to make it clump together and look kind of crusty. To finish, you add your clicker mask. The elastic at the back is hidden underneath my hair, and the points of attachment where it rests on my face are pretty well disguised by the sculpt extending outwards over this edge to mostly hide where it begins. So you can see it's mostly hidden at the back. I could definitely do a better job at hiding it if I get someone to help me check it all. And here is a close-up of the teeth. So you can see it looks fairly convincing and my real teeth are pretty well hidden. And it also means that I can eat, drink and talk about this makeup affecting it, which is like the best thing ever. Now to remove this, it takes a second to take off the mask, and then I remove all the fuzz and the foam board pieces. Gelatin can technically just be melted off in the shower with some warm water, but I wouldn't want all of the cotton clogging up my drains, so I decided to use a makeup remover on some cotton pads to help get it all off. And you definitely need a proper makeup remover to take off the Bondo. Then once the foam and cotton are off, I brushed my teeth to get off all the black tooth enamel paint, and then I had a lovely shower just to wash off all my body paint and get all of that product out of my hair. I hope this was informative and interesting and not too much of an information overload. I will post longer explanations and videos going through the sculpting, molding, casting, seaming, pre-painting and application if you would like to learn more in depth about how I did these things and also why we decided to do things this way, and they will be linked here when they are up. Thanks for watching.